Well, I've heard plans of 2025 since I met Hal Povenmire in 2008. He told me then that they were going to have disclosure in 2025. That was the plan.
The government's disclosure plan is going to be out on the table by 2025. And this is what he's saying. He said, and we're going to do it through soft disclosure, meaning there's going to be like a steady drip of information so as to not shock people. It's going to be like little bits of information coming out over a long span of time.
Right.
But, that we should know pretty much the majority of everything by 2025.
UFO disclosure in 2025 this year? Well, according to Chris Bledsoe in a recent interview on the Area 52 podcast, that's something he heard back in 2008, 2009 from a gentleman named Hal Povenmire, which I had not heard of. And we're going to learn a little bit more about him. So let's jump into today's video. I've got quite a few clips to show you, so stay with me. But first, we're going to take a look at Chris Bledsoe talking about Hal Povenmire and what he heard back in 2008, again, about a rollout of UFO disclosure this year, 2025. He's also going to bring up Tim Taylor briefly, who works for NASA. Guess who also works for NASA? Hal Povenmire. Take a look.
Well, I've heard plans of 2025 since I met Hal Povenmire in 2008. He told me then that they were going to have disclosure in 2025. That was the plan. There's a whole lot that I haven't talked about, such as NASA. Why was I at NASA? Why did they get me down there? How did I get into astronaut crew quarters? I got to meet the general. I got a special pin that only certain people have. And they wanted to know from me in other words, let's just say, they're just now talking about the plasmoid. Those are the orbs that I interact with. They're the angelic beings because they're not just, there's an intelligence there. It's created, some force created it. They were being harassed. Their astronauts and everybody were being harassed by these orbs and stuff.
You were told that by Tim?
I knew about it way back then.
When he briefed you, when he showed up to your house, how did he introduce himself? Like, what agency did he say he was from?
Showed us all his credentials. National Reconnaissance Office. He had a necklace with badges, credentials, and they were individual.
Wow.
Air Force, CIA, NASA, DOD, Area 51, and more.
And here's a picture of Chris Bledsoe with Hal Povenmire, so you can get an idea of what this gentleman looked like. Now, let's head down this little rabbit hole for a minute here, okay? So you hear Chris Bledsoe talking about that, right? Disclosure 2025. That's what he heard back in 2008, 2009. Now, I did a little research on Hal Povenmire, and there's not too much out there about him. He did pass away in 2019, was born in 1939, and according to Ryan Bledsoe, who was Chris Bledsoe's son, right, he claimed that Hal Povenmire had also worked for the CIA, right, worked for NASA, but also was part of Project Blue Book, okay, working with J. Allen Hynek to debunk stuff, was sort of his right-hand man, his protege. He also worked with Werner von Braun, right? So clearly this gentleman is, embedded in what you might say the monument of NASA, right? So it's quite interesting that Hal would, I'll use the word again, embed himself into the Bledsoe family, right? Now, Patrick, you would probably say, Patrick, what are you talking about? Let me explain. Here's a clip of Ryan Bledsoe on the Danny Jones podcast talking about Hal. Now, I've got two clips, so stay with me. But here's the first one.
Yeah, there's a ring at the door, and it's Hal Povenmire. I know they talked about him quite a bit on your last session, but it was me who answered the door. And I just remember being like, oh, here we go, because the documentary had already been filmed. I don't think it aired yet. We're having all these experiences. So I'm like, Mom, NASA's here, and we seriously. and call Dad, and I'm like, Dad, there's somebody from NASA here, and he's like, just entertain him till I get home, and the rest is history, you know. But this guy hopped in the car, drove 12 hours from Cape Canaveral just for a chat, and he was in our lives until the day he died, which I actually just listened to the episode, so I know he told that story, how he fell and hit his head and he had the coma. Same guy.
How?
Yeah. But until that day, he was intimately in our lives until he died.
That day Hal showed up, how old were you?
15. Maybe 16.
Do you remember specifically what he was saying and what he was asking and why? Like, why did he tell you he was there and how did he find out about you?
Yeah. So the funniest part is, and Dad would never tell this detail because he wasn't there. I was the one that answered the door. And I suspect he did this on purpose because he was a covert kind of individual. I think the idea was kind of look dumber than you are, you know, kind of put on a little bit of an act. And he was a little bit of a joker. He was really funny because he constantly would just crank out jokes. And they weren't like good ones either.
Right.
You know, he clearly had a persona. It was an act. I've come to understand. And he was a genius, but he kind of acted a little bit clueless. It was funny as fuck, man. And he rings the door and I answer and he says, "Hello, is this the residence of Chris Bledsoe?" And I said, "Do you mean Bledsoe?" He said, yeah, Chris Bledsoe. And he's acting like he's looking at his paper like he's trying to read the name. And I'm like, yes. And he shows me his lapel and it's NASA. And he's like, well, I'm with the press corps for NASA. I drove 12 hours from Cape Canaveral. I really was just hoping to have a conversation with your dad. I just wanted to ask some questions and, you know, just things like that. And I don't remember in that moment what we talked about, but I know over the next many years what we talked about up until he died. I do know that he was at some point he was a CIA analyst.
Really?
Oh yeah, dude. A lot of these people are double dipping.
He was CIA and NASA?
Yeah. At one point. Something he told my dad before he passed away. It was kind of like a confession, like, I don't have much longer. I want to tell you a little bit more about me before I'm gone kind of thing, you know? But he was a very cool guy. He was hilarious. He was so intelligent that he had 3 PhDs by the time he was like a teenager.
Can you look him up, Steve? We could pull up his like Wikipedia and look at him. Yeah. So we can show some people what this guy looks like.
He was a really cool guy. He's one of the very like first people at NASA. I mean, he was an intern for Werner von Braun.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that's him.
That's young Hal.
Yeah. So he was a
Yeah, there's nothing that like there's nothing legit here that
I swear you got to skip through the obituary, man, because I feel like we're in it. I could have sworn we are.
I want to read some stuff like about like what he did.
Well, yeah. So do you know Project Blue Book?
Yeah, of course.
He was like the right hand man of that. Alan J.
Really?
Yeah, Hynek.
He worked with Hynek?
He was like his protege.
Oh wow.
He was the guy that dropped in and did the debunking. So he shows up to our door, you know, reading his, is Chris Bledsoe here? He's playing us.
All right, so that clip will help you understand a little bit of background on Povenmire, right? And I'm probably saying his name wrong, but regardless, you know, this next clip has to do with this 2025 statement, right? Because not only did Chris Bledsoe say that in that first clip, right, that he was told about this disclosure. Here's Ryan Bledsoe, again, on the Danny Jones podcast, explaining that a little bit in further detail.
But he knew it was spiritual. He indicated to my dad that it may be his family.
Yeah.
The beings, the entities, you know. Now, here is something that I find particularly wild, but in about 2008 or 9, I would have been like 15 or 16 years old. Something he said to me and my family that for many years I've been paying attention to in my mind is that by the year 2025, the disclosure rollout would be on the table. All those years ago, 2008 or 2009, he said, the government's disclosure plan is going to be out on the table by 2025. And this is what he's saying. He said, and we're going to do it through soft disclosure, meaning there's going to be like a steady drip of information so as to not shock people. It's going to be like little bits of information coming out over a long span of time.
Right.
But, that we should know pretty much the majority of everything by 2025. He told me that when I was a kid.
What do you think the disclosure is gonna look like? Like, do you think that if there is government disclosure about this stuff, it's gonna be 100% accurate?
No, actually the opposite.
How so?
I think it's going to be more or less fear-based. More or less, militarized. You're seeing it now. They're jamming our space. They're jamming our radars. You've got congressional hearings where they're coming out and they're saying, I have a classified dossier that was handed to me by a superior, and I've heard stories of people getting harmed, and you've got like a Mexican Congress coming out with a body saying there's eggs in it, and you got all the stuff. It's building this fantastic sci-fi story, right? But I think at the end of
You think it's fear-based?
Yeah, I think the general picture is to create this narrative that we are all tiny specks of pretty much nothing, and that there's no hope, there's no any inkling of spiritual evolution. And why do I think that? It's because it's what the lady told to my dad. It's in the book. It's in the regression. It's what she said. I mean, it's the message. She said that there is a force. She didn't say who. She said that there are people at the helm of humanity. She didn't say the Illuminati. She didn't say the Bilderbergers. She didn't give a name, right? She just said there is a dark force.
A dark force at the helm of humanity.
At the tippy top, yep, controlling humanity. There's a dark force. And they are using biblical scripture, namely the book of Revelations, to sort of script events on a global stage to manifest a cataclysm, and that there would be a great deception. That this deception would be basically to paint the phenomenon in a negative light.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack in all of this, right? Essentially, so this guy coming from NASA, I mean, first of all, we just have to ask the question, why are the Bledsoes so heavily, investigated by NASA and other three-letter agencies in America, right? There's something there. It just doesn't. So strange. Anytime you try to just dismiss the Bledsoe family and what they, say and show, that's what always sticks with me is like, why is our government so interested in this gentleman, right? And what they have to say, and why are they going to talk to his 16-year-old son? Ryan here, right? And then they're telling him there's going to be some soft disclosure. Like, why would you reveal this to this family? You know what I mean? Something that was set out, if you're telling them back in 2008, 2009, something that's, 17 years in the future, right? What's the point of that? And, are we seeing some of this now, right? What Ryan is talking about, right? Is some of this coming to fruition? I don't know. Kind of seems like it, right? You definitely have different camps that try to say that the phenomena is not threatening in any way, and then you have another camp that says, no, it is, and we need to be careful, right? There's really no middle ground. It's either they're friendly or they're not. But if we're going to say that there's multiple species on this planet, how do we know any of this for sure? How do we know anything for sure? How can you be positive they're not threatening? And how can you be positive they are threatening, right? Which is it? There's really no way to know, and anyone being certain of it one way or the other, I would be weary of, right? And when you hear Ryan talking about the lady, right, that's someone that's a being that's in his book. He talks about it a lot, this lady that he's envisioned and had conversations with and continues to, and that person, this being, this entity gives Chris Bledsoe messages. Right. But again, how can you trust those messages? You know what I mean? How do you trust that? Even if they're making you feel good, even if this, that, the other, whatever. How do you know you're not getting bamboozled by these non-human intelligences, right? I think there's a lot of things said, a lot of predictions made, and it's too hard to find out what is the actual truth. It really is sort of a solo journey, right, in this. But, you know, if it's just such a, I don't even know where to begin with all of this, to be honest with you, try to understand what's going on, because you have all these people, right, from government agencies going to talk to civilians and then just peppering them with information that they then repeat, right? Oh, I was told about 2025. Oh, I was told about this. Oh, I was told about that. I was told this. I was told they're going to do this. I was told that, you know, it's just so strange. It's just so strange, right? And I don't really know what to think about all of it. This gentleman, Hal, is very interesting for sure. He's no longer around, so my respect to him and his family and his service to our country for sure, and what he did. But it is interesting, what is the purpose of going to visit people like the Bledsoes, and how many families have they visited like that? Are the Bledsoes the only one, right? Because you've got now Hal and Tim Taylor, both from NASA, very interested in the Bledsoe family, right? So, I don't know. Just so interesting. And this Hal gentleman is very interesting, right? And as far as like disclosure, it being a soft disclosure coming out slowly, it's fear-based, you know. I don't know. I mean, again, so confusing. I don't know what to think. So anyway, look, I recommend going to check out these podcasts. I'll put links in the description. You can go check out Area 52, that Chris Bledsoe. It's a documentary. Again, highly recommend it. And then Danny Jones' interview with Ryan Bledsoe is really good. I recommend checking that out. And Danny actually did an interview with Chris Bledsoe too, which I highly recommend too. It's a really, really good interview. So again, links in the description. Go check it out. Let me know what you guys think. Is disclosure underway currently in 2025? Are we in the midst of disclosure? Right? Like, we're asking for disclosure to come, but are we in the midst of it? Is it happening? Right? Is it one of those things that it won't be from one day to the next? It will be just sort of this, again, soft rollout, right? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.